In 2018, I dug my first grave. It wasn't for anybody I knew. In fact, it wasn't for anybody at all. And perhaps that means it was less of a grave than it was a grave-shaped hole in the ground. But regardless, there I was, digging under the tutelage of a man who I had coached through burying his father just a few months before. I had just helped open a natural burial ground in the Adirondacks when Eric called. His father was dying, and he wanted him to have a natural burial. But Eric didn't want help. Eric wanted an epic experience, created with his own hands. So without ever meeting Eric, I taught him how to care for his father's body after death, how to bathe it and shroud it and keep it cool with ice, how to get the paperwork he needed, and how to get to the cemetery. But the last part, the digging of the grave and the lowering of his father's body into it, I had never done. Eric would have to figure that part out by himself. And so he and his wife, Catherine, did just that. And then he taught me how to do it. Hi, my name is Michelle Hogle Acciavatti. I'm a death worker and the founder of Vermont Forest Cemetery. I want to tell you about a radical act of hope that leads to an extraordinary act of generosity. It's your future and Earth's legacy. Let me take a step back for you. In 1983, when I was 9 months old, I took my first steps at my great-grandmother's funeral. And with those steps, I set foot on the path to my ultimate legacy. Now, some people think that children shouldn't go to funerals, that death is too dark, too sad, too scary. We need to shelter children from death. Not my parents. I don't think it ever occurred to my parents to shelter me from death. And it certainly never occurred to me that death was something I needed to be sheltered from. My whole life, I went to funerals. I gave readings at funerals, and I ate hot dish after funerals in the Midwest. I sat Shiva after funerals in the Boston area. When I was a senior in college, 2 of my best friends died in tragic accidents just 3 weeks apart. And I learned there is no amount of drinking that can distract you from grief. But it never occurred to me that there was a career in being okay with being around death. But what I am now is a death worker. Just as I took my first steps at a funeral, I now stand beside those taking their first steps into grief. I have always been fascinated with the ways we try and describe the unknown. My first 2 loves were poetry and science, and I like to think that death is the confluence of those 2 things. But what I went into after college was neuroscience, by far the most poetic of the sciences. But still, what I was interested in was the relationship between motor development and cognitive development in infants. You would think I was about as far away from death as I could get. But death doesn't only occur at the end of a long life. And when my career took me to the Office of Ethics at Boston Children's Hospital, I found myself mainly working with families who were making the heart-wrenching decision to stop or forego the treatment that their child needed to survive. And something in me became quite calm when I did that work. And I started to wonder, is there a better way to support families going through this? One day, I was talking this over with a friend who was studying to be a birth midwife. You, she said, should be a death midwife. So, in 2013, when I was 30 years old, I left academic science and I devoted myself to death and dying. Most people don't like to think about death, but they are fascinated by what I do. I like to think that my role is to connect you with your reality as a mortal being. You're alive today, but you won't be alive forever. I am a ton of fun at parties. I joke, but the truth is, I can't go to a party without hearing someone's deepest fears about death, their most intimate experiences caring for a dying loved one. Sure, some people back away slowly when they find out what I do, but for others, I am a confessional. I might not ever know their name, but I will know their grief experience. We are born into communities that raise us. Midwives, doctors, nurses, family are there to greet us when we arrive. Family, friends, and lovers accompany us through life. I stand at the end of that journey. I am trained as a death doula, a funeral director, a home funeral guide that helps people lay out their dead the way we did before there were funeral directors. As a death educator, a hospice volunteer, an advanced care planner. As a pregnancy loss doula, a memoir writer, and a lay chaplain. A death educator, a natural burial educator, and a natural burial cemeterian. But what I really am is a collector of stories. Many of us die alone. The fact is, we have to. In a decade of sitting at the bedside of the dying, I have learned that the process of birth and the process of death are the inverse of each other. If the labor of being born brings life into this world, the labor of death takes life out of it. And the community that surrounds us as we are dying is a community that shepherds us into the unknown, a place we can only go when we die. But we die the way we live. My mother-in-law used to say, as we age, we don't change, we become more so. And this is true of death as well. After all, dying is something that happens while we are still alive. And we can only go through it as the person we have lived our entire lives as. We carry with us our habits and our faults, our quirks and our fears, our ways of thinking and communicating and loving. So part of what I do is help people understand the choices they make about how to live. This will help them understand the choices they need to make about how to die. Another part of my work is helping people bury their loved ones in the forest. And another part, at least at the moment, is growing a human being, a mortal life. And I know some of you will think this is morbid, but to me, it is a profound and beautiful truth. When my child, hi baby, is born, there will be one more future death in the world. Which means lately I've thought a lot about legacy and what it means. Because there's what we do, but there is also who we are, by which I mean the choices we make about how to love this world while we are alive. We aren't promised a good life, or a happy one, or even a fair one. We only have the choices we make in every moment. In Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer writes about reciprocity as a deep way of showing gratitude, a way of loving. As I stand on the precipice of motherhood, it occurs to me that the greatest gift we are given in life is the gift of life itself. We humans exist in this liminal space between before birth and after death. And in that time, we have the awesome and terrifying freedom to make that space into a shape that makes sense to us. How then can I raise my child to be in reciprocity with their life? To live this life in all its complexity as a continual act of love. To make each step they take along their path one that celebrates the all too brief time any of us get to be here, to be ourselves. I ask people who they are, and they tell me what they have done. But I am far more interested in the why than the what. Why did you become a teacher? Why did you leave that marriage? Why did you start recycling? In 2016, I worked to fully legalize natural burial in Vermont. And in 2023, when I was 40 years old, I opened the first cemetery dedicated to natural burial in the state, Vermont Forest Cemetery. Natural burial gives our bodies back to the land. It's a way of being in reciprocity with the gift of being alive on this miraculous blue planet. Our bodies are blood and meat and bones. Iron, carbon, calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, water, in short, a snack for this planet. And I can't think of a more radical act than the decision to leave your body to sustain this planet for a future in which you will never be alive. But that's exactly what you do with natural burial. When you choose natural burial, you choose to give your body back to the ecosystem that sustained it in life. And this is a unique choice in death care, one that integrates our needs as mourners with the needs of the planet, that honors both the cycles of grief and the cycles of nature, that acknowledges we are a part of this ecosystem. When I opened Vermont Forest Cemetery, I realized that this forest will become a living memorial to everybody who will be buried there. Their stories are mine to keep alive. I am the keeper of stories for future ghosts. And this forest is not an anonymous place for me. Ron Langley was a musician and a carpenter, and any time I make a rash mistake in the forest, I can hear him chuckle. That, he says, was a dumb idea. Randall Stratton was an architect and a dreamer who created an incredible institution in an estate that he restored in Siena in Italy. He was curious about what I was building here, and I see him from time to time strolling with his hands behind his back. Olive Seaton exploded into this world, desperate to live life on her own terms. She nursed baby birds to health, and her grave is always surrounded by birdsong. But man, does she keep me on my toes. Pay attention, she says. So I do. As head cemeterian, my job is to steward this forest for the future, not just from the perspective of the trees and the soil, but from that of the people who will be buried here and those that love them. Their bodies will become part of the physical structure of the forest. Their stories, its legacy. And while I don't know what happens after death, I do know that the stories of those that I care for and bury become a part of my life. This spring, I helped a mother bury her daughter. As the year has turned since then, the forest has come into full leaf and begun to be tinged with gold. Birds have nested, hatched, fledged, and begun to flock for their journey south. Red squirrel kits and coyote pups have grown up and joined their packs. A fisher cat made a nesting burrow on top of one of the graves and then returned to its nomadic wanderings. Butterflies have given way to the caterpillars, and berries have come from the flowers. All of this nourished in part by her daughter's body. Coming to the forest helps her take her first steps into grief, into life without her daughter. As a mother, I will bring a death into this world. As a death worker, I bring life from death. I hope with my body I can make this world a better place. In life, we take steps forwards, backwards, sideways, and in death, we can make one last good choice. Take one more step for the future and choose to leave our bodies to this planet that will turn on without us until no one left alive knows who we are. Most cemeteries are monuments to our hubris, our unwillingness to accept that we are mortal, finite, the fallacy that what we do gets remembered. Many of us, right, are drawn to old cemeteries. I know I'm not the only one that stands amongst these headstones and wonders, who was this person? Beyond their name, beyond their dates of birth and death, the only part of their legacy left for me to know. At Vermont Forest Cemetery, the legacies of the people who choose to be buried here, people who so love the world that they choose to give their bodies to it so that the people that come after them might love it as well, those stories become a part of our ecosystem. Part of the forest is a Norway spruce grove. These spruce, whose short needles lend them the name spruce that is like a fir, reach high into the air and they catch the wind. Some sun shines through in spots, but even on the warmest days of summer, it is a bower of cool shade and a canopy of snow in deep winter. And unlike the quaking aspen which chatter away in every breeze, it is only when the big winds move through the spruce that you can hear a sound that is like the tide rushing to meet the shore. We call it the wind chapel. in natural burial, our bodies become transformed into new life. This forest is an anchor between a life that was and a life that will be. We have that in life too, in the form of stories. Our lives become stories, which interweave with the stories of those that come after us, and those that come after them, and after them, and after them. And the anchor to those stories are our names. Whose names do you carry?